obvious that the result of today's vote is not so much a question of the acceptability of wording as it is a conflict of political approaches. That's the only thing I agree with what was said by the French colleague. The Russian delegation from the very beginning undertook intensive constructive efforts to develop an effective reaction from the Council to the dramatic events in Syria. The first such reaction found its reflection in a consensual statement by the President on the 3rd of August. Based on that approach, we, together with Chinese partners, prepared a draft resolution in which, as events developed, we made some changes, bearing in mind the concerns of Council colleagues. We'd like to thank the partners, especially the BRICS states, for support of our text. It's vitally important that at the heart of the Russian and Chinese draft was the logic of respect of national sovereignty, territorial integrity of Syria, and non-intervention, including military, in their affairs. The logic of unity of the Syrian people, refraining from confrontation, and inviting all to an even-handed and thorough dialogue for the purposes of achieving civilian peace and national agreement by reforming the socio-economic and political life of the country. Today's refused draft was based on a very different philosophy, the philosophy of confrontation. We can't agree with its unilateral accusatory bent against Damascus. We believe it unacceptable, the threat of an ultimatum of sanctions against the Syrian authorities. This approach is against the principle of a peaceful settlement of a crisis on the basis of a full Syrian national dialogue. Our proposals for wording on the non-acceptability of foreign military intervention were not taken into account, and based on the well-known events in North Africa, can only alarm us. Alarm as well the weak wording on the opposition, the lack of our appeal to them to distance themselves from extremists. On the basis of statements of some Western politicians on President Assad's loss of legitimacy, such an approach could provoke in Syria a full-fledged conflict and, as a result, a destabilization in the region overall. The collapse of Syria as a result of a civil war would have a very destructive impact on the situation in the entire Middle East. The situation in Syria cannot be considered in the Council apart from the Libyan experience. The international community is alarmed by statements that compliance with Security Council resolutions in Libya in the NATO interpretation is a model for future actions of NATO in implementing responsibility to protect. It's easy to see that today's model of unified defenders could happen in Syria. Everyone here should understand that the Russian position regarding the conflict in Lebanon in no way is based on any kind of special ties with the regime of Gaddafi, and especially that a number of states around the table had more warm relations with the Jamahiriya. The people of Libya had their words to say regarding Gaddafi, and they determined his fate. For us, members of the UN, including in a precedent way, it's very important as to how it was implemented and how something turned into its contrary, turned upside down Security Council resolution. The demand for fast ceasefire turned into a full-fledged civil war, humanitarian, social, economic, and military consequences of which are spilling over well outside of Libya. The situation in the no-fly zone has turned into bombing of oil facilities, TV stations, and other civilian sites. The embargo for arms has turned into a naval blockade on the western side of Libya, including a humanitarian blockade. Today, we have the drama Benghazi, which has turned into the western Libyan towns, Sirte, Banevilla. These types of models should be excluded from global practices once and for all. With respect to Syria, we're not advocates of the Assad regime. We believe that it's unacceptable, the violence, and we condemn the pressure of protests against peaceful demonstrators. However, the reason for this drama is not only in the hard actions of the authorities. The recent events show that a radical position does not hide its extremist bent and is relying on terror tactics, hoping for foreign sponsors outside of the law. Armed groups supported by smuggling and other diversionary supplies are given. Land is being taken over, killings and atrocities against people who comply with the law enforcement authorities. And universities and schools, representatives of the Syrian intelligence and civil servants recently have been casualties of the terrorists. We give our condolences to the Mufti Ahmed Husunu, who is well known in the East for his active work to lay the basis of tolerance and international dialogue in connection with the death of his 22-year-old son from terrorists on Sunday. We must bear in mind that a significant portion of Syria does not share the demands for a quick regime change, and they would rather have gradual changes, believing that they have to be implemented while maintaining in the country civilian peace and harmony. And such changes, even if they're late in coming, are still starting to be implemented, these changes, and we must not close our eyes to this. The best way to get out of the crisis is to refuse from provoke a confrontation, to bring together all responsible members of the international community, to bring the parties to come up with an inclusive intra-Syrian political process. This has been chosen in Yemen. That's where intensive mediation efforts are underway for the purposes of bringing together the hostile parties. Russia is continuing work with Damascus, where we call on the Syrian leadership to be quicker in implementing the changes. They need to free people who've been detained during the unrest and who've committed no criminal actions. A more active dialogue needs to be taking place with the opposition to give access to the international media, step up their interaction with the Arab League. Judging by what the Arab League has done and what has is happening on TV, our efforts are bearing fruit. We're continuing to do a lot of work with constructive patriotic groups of the Syrian opposition. They are concerned about the fate of their country. They have said they want no foreign interference in internal affairs. We believe that today's signal will be adequately perceived by opposition forces. There's no alternative to dialogue. There cannot be. If the opposition believes that laws are imperfect from Mr. Assad, then they need to take up the invitation of the government to discuss them. We'll indicate our concerns to Syrian opposition leaders when they will visit Moscow soon. Chances for a peaceful end are possible, and we will be supporting these prospects in coordination with all constructively inclined partners. If Council colleagues accept our logic, aimed at a dialogue and a full national reconciliation in Syria, we would continue work on the Russian-Chinese draft for a balanced resolution containing a vital concept of a settlement. Our draft remains on the table. On this basis, we're prepared to develop a genuinely collective, constructive position for the international community and not get involved with legitimizing already adopted unilateral sanctions or attempts for violent regime change. The people of Syria deserves change with peace, with the support of the international community. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.